Knockdown Rule is in effect. I'm Steve Kim, joined by Mario Lopez. And Mario, it's Chapter 2.
I'm very excited.
So
very
everyone
excited.
is.
As a matter of fact, I was upset with you last time he was here because I felt like you didn't let him
Me?
really get into the stories.
Me?
Before
Wow.
we introduce our extremely special guest, shout out to Buffalo Knuckles
Our
on the
Draymond
ones and
Green.
twos.
Our
But
Draymond
now,
Green.
the legend, the man, Mr. Bob Arum himself from Top Rank, of course, is back with us. Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate you coming to visit us despite what Steve Kim said about you last time you were here.
It was all off the record. That was all off the record.
Give it
You
a
know
hard
what
time.
it feels like? This is like old movie night. This is like bringing in a mogul, a motion picture mogul, who wants to talk about Charlie Chaplin movies.
Hey, and I appreciate the classics. And we had such great response when you were here, sir, and so many wonderful, wonderful stories. We could have you for a solid week, and we still probably wouldn't get to a quarter of them. But let's just start off with what's happening this Friday. We have Lomachenko yet again here in L.A. Tell us about what we can look forward to.
What you can look forward to, and that's the truth, is to see a master of his craft. This is like having the opportunity to watch Picasso paint pictures. This is a guy that we haven't seen the likes of, at least in my lifetime, which goes back a lot of years now.
That's saying something.
Yeah, and I mean his technical ability and the way he's the master of that ring and how he finishes the opponent is something never before seen. Now, people say, hey, Floyd Mayweather was a great defensive fighter, and he certainly was. But you watched a Mayweather fight, and it was all virtually defense. Very, very good, and he won the fights with defense.
The excitement stopped once he got in the ring.
Now you look at Lomachenko, probably better defense because he has, I think, a better concept of movement and distance than Floyd had, and Floyd was great. But the difference with Loma is he's always looking, while he's playing defense, for how he can destroy you.
Yes, definitely different. Just as a fact, definitely different. And, you know, I would say you've had probably the best fighter of each generation in the last couple of generations, right? If you really think about it, is it fair to say, or is it too soon to say that Lomachenko is the fighter of this generation?
Well, I also promote Terrence Crawford, who isn't chopped liver. Terrence is a hell of a.
I'm a huge fan.
A hell of a performer. He's different.
Yes.
Terrence reminds me of Sugar Ray Leonard. This kid, Lomachenko, reminds me of no one. I have never seen anybody.
Not even a Pacquiao, right? A young Pacquiao.
Not even close.
Really?
Pacquiao didn't have any concept of distance. He was a great fighter, great movement. He'd go, he'd hit you and then disappear and go. But it wasn't the technical aspect that Loma has. Loma is, for example, I never saw a fighter on his feet with that type of ability that Loma has. And what I love about him is he's not just content to win the fight with his defensive ability, but he's always looking for the opening, how he could destroy his opponent. And sometimes that plays terrible head games on the opponent. I have never seen a fighter at that level make so many opponents just quit.
That's what's been
right
so
in the middle
impressive,
of the
I
fight.
think, of the fight.
The Baryshnikov of boxing.
The Baryshnikov of boxing, but then breaking you down psychologically as well as physically.
I mean, Bob, has Nicholas Walters been seen yet? I mean, he literally has not fought since he quit against Lomachenko about two and a half years ago.
And Walters was a hell of a fighter.
Yes, a
hell
dangerous
of a
fighter.
But with that humiliation, he didn't want to ever come back again. We could never get him back. And look at Rigondeaux, one of the best fighters in the amateurs ever. 2 Olympic gold medals, great skills, and Loma made him quit.
Incredibly impressive.
I mean, it's unbelievable. So, you take Kroller, who Loma's fighting on Friday night.
Who looks very well prepared, by the way.
He is
Great
very
shape.
well prepared. He's a good, classy lightweight.
Tough guy.
He fought Linares twice. The question is, how is Loma going to destroy him? Now, there's no doubt in my mind that Loma's going to destroy Krolla. And it's going to be like watching an artist at work. Watching Lomachenko is, for anybody who has any interest in boxing or athleticism, is a real treat.
It is a real treat and real special if you do get a chance to watch a guy in his prime.
Yeah, and Bob, couple things here. This fight's on a Friday night, which people have asked me on Twitter, why not Saturday? Explain this decision.
Well, there are only so many Saturdays in the year. And there are other promotional companies that put their fights on Saturdays on other networks. There's the UFC, which is all of its events are on ESPN. They have fights that will be on Saturday and different days of the week. So in boxing, we have been used with the premium networks to doing all our fights on Saturday. But on Friday, there's more homes in use. And if we can demonstrate that we have a big audience, that many people will go online on ESPN Plus to watch Friday night show, which is loaded from top to bottom, I think that opens up the possibility of us doing more Friday night events.
Now, Bob, the Anthony Corolla is the WBA mandatory. So, Lomachenko didn't have much choice here. The original opponent was the IBF belt holder, Richard Comey. I'm reading different things. Is Richard Comey going to be next for Lomachenko, provided everything goes well on Friday night?
Well, I talked to Lou DiBella, who's the promoter of Comey. We have a contract with Comey for his next 2 fights. And I said, Lou, look, if Comey would rather fight Teofimo, who is fighting on the April 20th Crawford Khan card against the European champion, if he'd rather fight Teofimo, we'd arrange that, and Loma would fight somebody else. And Lou said, no one's thinking. Comey wants to fight Loma, and so that fight will be on ESPN or ESPN Plus sometime this summer.
And, Bob, there's a guy by the name of Mikey Garcia who got beat pretty handily by Errol Spence. And, look, I thought last year Garcia, Lomachenko, me and Mario talked about it
That was
a lot.
in my Mount Rushmore of fights to see.
Is that fight now essentially, in your view, Lomachenko-Garcia, a dead fight?
No, but you have to understand, Garcia's value as an opponent has been diminished. Why? Because he took this fight against a much bigger guy, 2 weight classes up. I told everybody it wouldn't be competitive, and it wasn't. And he didn't try to win. I mean, I remember, I'm an old guy, so I've seen a lot of stuff. The first big fight that I promoted in Europe outside of the heavyweight division was a fight between the great middleweight champion, Carlos Monzon, the Argentinian,
Yes.
great fighter. And he was matched with the welterweight champion, a fabulous fighter named Jose Napoles. Jose Mantequilla Napoles.
Mantequilla, great nickname.
Yeah. And Lopez, Napoles was outsized by Monzon, who was a great fighter. But Napoles fought his heart out.
Yeah.
And he finally got knocked out in the 7th or 8th round. And you said, well, he was too small to fight Monzon, but he tried like hell. You can't say that about Mikey Garcia. He didn't try. Once he got in the ring and saw how much bigger Spence was, hey, no surprise, man. I saw them, standing next to each other at the press conference. He didn't try to win. He tried to survive. So he's hurt his marketability. That being said, I would love to make a Loma Garcia fight, but only at 135 pounds. Because Loma, when he fights lightweights, is fighting generally bigger guys. Because Loma is really a featherweight. 126 pounds, 130 pounds, that's his best weight.
So he's maxed out at lightweight, you feel?
Totally maxed out at lightweight.
Mario,
It
he's
makes
made it
it-
clear he might actually move down. Loma said at the media day, I'm a 35er. I want to actually move down to 130. So there's no doubt. I don't think he's ever seeing 140, at least not for the near future.
Well, I wouldn't let him go. I mean, you know, Linares at 135 outsized him. Pedraza outsized him. But now you're going to see Loma. You know, when he fought Linares and hurt his shoulder, but it was a good performance. Linares is a terrific fighter. And then he fought Pedraza, another really good Puerto Rican former champion.
Right.
The shoulder really wasn't. He said it was, but it wasn't 100%.
You could tell.
I talked to Neil last night, Neil Alatras, doctor,
Right.
and he cautioned him to throw only certain kinds of punches and not to throw his hook.
Oh wow!
Because
Talk about limiting yourself.
It could re-injure the shoulder.
Not to digress too much, but going back to Garcia jumping up 2 weight classes and taking on Errol Spence, it really makes it. You really have to stop and pause and see how incredible it was when Duran went up 2 weight classes to fight Leonard and to end up beating him. And then I realized to do it yet again when he went up 2 weight classes to beat Iran Barkley for middleweight. I mean, it really is a different.
Yeah, but different. Again.
How so?
Duran started as a lightweight.
Right.
And fought Ray as in a welterweight division.
Correct.
But you neglect what happened in the interim, that Duran made himself a welterweight, didn't go right to Leonard.
Correct. He had some fights, right.
Some fights? He fought Carlos Palomino.
Right.
At welterweight, one of the great welterweights of the time. So Duran got himself physically
prepared
ready to fight at the higher weight.
Correct.
So when he fought Leonard at welterweight in Montreal in 1980, it wasn't a guy jumping up in weight.
Correct. I don't know if that would have made a difference had Garcia still gone up and maybe fought welter. Incredibly impressive nonetheless, but yes, you're right. It is a huge difference as far as just jumping in the deep end.
Was tremendous, but again, when he fought Iran Barkley, he had already had middleweight fights with Hagler and Hearns. So it wasn't like he was suddenly, Iran, I'm going up from welterweight to fight you at middleweight.
Right.
But he was already a middleweight.
But we're still talking about a lightweight that eventually ended up getting a middleweight title.
That is possible. But he could go up slowly and one step at a time.
Right.
Just the way Pacquiao started as a bantamweight and ended up as a welterweight.
And by the way, Pacquiao did move up 2 weight classes from, I think it was David Diaz at 35 to De La Hoya to 47.
Right,
so that was the Bob Beamon leap. That's really analogous. Bob, one quick note about your undercard. Gilberto Ramirez is fighting as the co-main. I think my official word is, I guess he vacated the WBA or the WBO 168. Is that true?
That's not true.
Okay. I saw a picture with him and Calum Smith, and there's a lot of reports. How possible is that matchup?
Well, I told Gilberto, who I love, he's a really class kid.
Nice kid.
Wonderful, great looking.
Big kid.
Good fight. Big kid. I said, okay, we'll give you a fight at light heavyweight, which is Friday night against Carpensi, who's a pretty good light heavyweight. If you want to stay at light heavyweight, fine. We'll eventually get you with Votzik, or, we have all the, pretty much all of the light heavyweights fight on ESPN. We'll put you with one of the champions, maybe Kovalev, maybe Bidabov, but plenty of opportunities. But be sure that you want to go to light heavyweight. Don't vacate the 168-pound title, because you may want to come down. You say you don't have much problem making 168.
He doesn't, Bob? Because when I stood next to him, I was like, wow, I can't believe this guy made 168.
He doesn't have a problem making it, according to him.
Wow.
There's discipline and so forth.
Sure.
But there's so far, you've never seen him go on a scale at 168, like some of these guys, and they have to hold him up because he's collapsing.
Right.
But that's not been the case.
Okay.
Now, there's this Callum from England, who's a great super middleweight, who's also a big son of a gun. He's as big as Gilberto. And Eddie Hearn told me that would be an unbelievable fight in England. And the deal we would have was do the fight in England on pay-per-view for Sky, sell out the O2 Arena, and bring it back on an afternoon to ESPN.
Wow.
Now that's reaching across the aisle.
That is
that's
reaching
working
across.
together.
That's
Well,
exactly
what
for
we
the
need.
benefit of both parties and a
Look,
huge event.
Look, ESPN has built up Ramirez, and that is not a problem if the fight is in England to do the telecast on ESPN on a Saturday afternoon.
Bob, speaking of ESPN, April 20th, Madison Square Garden, your first foray into the pay-per-view realm with this network. Terrence Crawford takes on Amir Khan at Madison Square Garden. I've been told after the Final Four there'll be a full-court press on this promotion. What are you expecting in terms of your expectations in terms of buys for that particular event?
Going into the promotion, I thought that it would be reasonable to anticipate like 350,000 buys. But now, with the megaphone of ESPN, with the way this is being promoted on ESPN and something else I'll mention, I think that this can really go much higher. Now, the other thing I want to mention, in addition to ESPN, is the cable systems and the satellite providers like DirecTV and Dish are now in a state of panic. Why? Because UFC has made a deal with ESPN that all its pay-per-view will be distributed on ESPN+. So we have told the cable systems on demand, we've told the satellite providers that, look, we're going to do the same thing as UFC unless you show us an effort. We put up all the money on the pay-per-view. You sit back and you cream off 50%. That's not right. So they have said, wait till you see how we're going to promote the event. They're throwing in a lot of money on the promotion. You're going to see DirecTV, Comcast promoting this around the clock. So with ESPN and with the emphasis on what the cable systems and satellite providers will do, I think we can double the 350,000.
I, as a fan, love to see all the love that ESPN has been giving in the features, and I think they've been doing a great job. And like you said, I'm sure they're going to continue to keep ramping it up.
Because it's a class. First of all, the promotion is tremendous.
Tremendous.
And I mean, the main event, Amir Khan always gives 100%.
He's always in a good fight.
And he's bigger than Crawford. He boxes well. It's going to be a very good competitive fight.
I agree. And Crawford, who is one of my favorite fighters, like you said, I think he's one of the most skilled fighters out there. I love how he's able to essentially be ambidextrous and switch back and forth. And I love that he's also got that a bit of a nasty streak to him and a good killer instinct to go along with that skill set.
And what about the undercard? You got to talk about the undercard.
Oh, no, I want to get to that in a second. But before we get to the undercard, here's my question to you. The thing about Crawford, to me, I really like the guy. And I like the fact that he's actually a little stoic and old school in that sense. But because he's not as loud and boisterous, and maybe, how personally involved do you get in asking Crawford to change it up or turn it up a notch when it comes to the promotion? Or do you get involved at all in that at all? Or do you let him just be who he is?
I get involved. I always let the fighter be who he is. I tell him they have to help with the promotion, but don't step out of character.
Right.
Remember, one of my favorite fighters, and he did tons of business for me, never stopped out of his character. He was stoic, and that was Marvelous Marvin Hagler.
Yes.
And you can work on that. You can't present a phony picture for the public. It doesn't work.
Got to be authentic.
It got to be authentic.
Exactly.
And Bud Crawford is authentic. I really admire him. He is not a guy that's scowling all the time.
No.
He has a nice personality. He is highly intelligent. I told him, Terrence, be who you are. And he is. And I'm very proud of him. And not only is he a great fighter, but he is a terrific person.
So, Bob, You've already sent out the smoke signals on Twitter. This is a fight that I think me and Mario have placed number one in terms of what we want to see along with most boxing fans. How do we get Omaha's finest in there with Errol Spence?
Well, I don't want to negotiate with Heyman on this podcast, but let me tell you.
You can if you want.
Well, maybe I will start it.
Is it a possibility, though, Bob?
Well, after this fight is over, I get back to the West Coast, either Los Angeles or Las Vegas, and on Monday morning, I will call Mr. Heyman and say it's time to make this fight.
Oh, God, that's a round right there. We're not
yes.
good. I'm glad it's not going down the Pacquiao-Mayweather spoiled milk route.
And it's easy fight to make because we have a roadmap for it. And that was the Pacquiao-Mayweather fight where HBO and Showtime joint distributed the fight on pay-per-view. Every issue was worked out as far as the announcing team and so forth. And I am absolutely certain that when we sit down with our partners at ESPN, we will find a way to accommodate the other side and their network that distributes the Spence fight. This is an easy fight to make. It's a fight that will do tremendous business. It's a fight that the public wants. I have confidence in my guy, Terrence. I had the privilege, after a fight in Oklahoma City, where Spence came to watch the fight, and Terrence came. And after the fight, I saw this cluster of people outside, and it was Terrence and Errol talking to each other, and they want to fight. And when the two fighters want to fight and test out who is best, if promoters don't let that fight happen, they should be ashamed of themselves.
If you could create the blueprint on how it would go in your mind, timing-wise, do you see it happening this next calendar year?
I would happen. No, this year.
This year.
Oh, shoot.
Awesome. I love it. I love it.
When you have a fight that people want to see, and the fighters, neither fighter has anything scheduled, then you do the fight this year. And then you pick the month and so forth that makes the most sense, and that's subject to talking about it. But definitely this year.
Oh, that gets me excited.
Tear down that wall.
Yes,
Bob,
yes.
speaking of that undercard, you know a guy I'm sky high on. I think he's the best prospect in boxing. He's a true blue chipper. Teofimo Lopez, he's the co-main on this card. Map out the rest of his year, and what do you think of his overall ceiling as a fighter?
Well, I don't know. You know, he's really taken me by surprise. We knew he was talented, and that's why we signed him. We didn't know that he was this talented. And he's like a kid you can't hold back. He and his father, I mean, when I
What
signed...
a character, huh?
When we signed Tyson Fury, I got a call from them, hey, we'll fight Fury.
That's awesome.
So, you know, Teofimo has a tough fight now on this card, on the Crawford Con card. It'll be on part of the pay-per-view telecast. He'll be fighting the European champion, who's a very good fighter, who's in all the ratings, and that's the first step. And if he's successful on April 20th, we'll bring him back this summer, headlining an ESPN card where he'd be the main event against the top lightweight. And I would look for Teofimo to fight against Loma in a huge pay-per-view fight sometime next year, early next year.
That was my question. Do we realistically see that
after the
clash
Super
happening?
Bowl? Yeah.
After the Super Bowl. Wow. And I'll tell you what, if he continues to develop and impress the way he has, and we know his confidence, you don't want to feed steak to a baby too soon.
Yeah.
But early this next year, it makes it so intriguing because I think if you wait longer than that, it gets a little dangerous for Loma. But then that timing, I think it's like I'm intrigued on how that happens. He's a young, strong kid, obviously with the experience and the skill level with Loma. But I think it's a very competitive fight. How do you see it, Bob?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think Loma's unbelievable.
Oh, he's special, no
right.
doubt.
Okay. So now, I've been through this. Loma's fought the top talent in the lightweight division, and I talked to his opponents, and they all say the same thing. He's really a great fighter, but we'll try to find a way to beat him. That's what they say, and they haven't. With Teofimo and his father, they said, we're going to destroy this guy.
Right, of course.
Now we'll find a way to beat him. We're going to destroy him.
Well, they want to fight Fury.
And so they have, again, but let's not jump. I mean, Teofimo is a great, great prospect, but Loma is special.
Incredibly, yes.
And, a funny thing, on this card, we have Felix Verdeo, who I thought was going to be the the next Cotto, the next Felix Trinidad.
Me too.
But then he went, bad and ran with the wrong people in Puerto Rico. Now he's got his head into it. He fight Vasquez. And when I signed Lomachenko after the London Olympics, I also signed at the same time Felix Verdeo, Jose Ramirez, and Oscar Valdez. And Loma had fought all three guys in the amateurs. And I said, Loma, tell me, how do you rate these guys? He said, they're all good fighters. Oscar is this, and so he could be beaten. Jose is that, and Jose wasn't developed the way he is now. And he said, but Felix Verdeo is a real talent. He is the toughest guy that I fought in my entire amateur career.
Wow.
That's 397 fights. So I thought in Verdeo, I had the next coming of the big Puerto Rican star. And maybe we'll still do that. He's in with Brian Vasquez, a former champion, and now he's talking the right things. We'll see on April 20 how much Felix Verdeo has. And again, that down the road, if he really is coming back in great, great style, and we'll see that April 20th, down the road for next year, Verdeo against Loma is a hell of a fight.
Yeah,
Bob,
still
also
very young.
on this undercard, Shakur Stevenson takes on a very tough fight in Pitufo Diaz. I'm actually surprised you guys green-lighted it. One note on Shakur. I know some...
Well, wait a second. Don't blame us.
Yeah.
Don't blame them, Kim.
Because my matchmakers were against the fight. They said that Shakur reaching for Diaz, a former champion, who's coming down from 130 to 126, is a bridge too far. They did everything they could, Brad Goodman and Bruce Trampler, to talk the Shakur Stevenson people out of fighting Diaz. We could have got another opponent a lot safer. Shakur Stevenson decided with Andre Ward, who is his one of his managers, and with James Prince, and with the grandfather, and with Coach K. They got a great team with him. That's the guy they wanted to fight. Now, my matchmakers, who I listen to more than anybody else, says no, very dangerous. It's maybe too soon. But we'll see.
Bob, some video surfaced last week of an incident that happened last summer in Miami with Shakur. See, there's no league that will suspend people like the NFL, like they've done with players that get in trouble off the field. What role do you think a promoter plays when one of your fighter gets into legal issues?
Well, what we did when we heard about that incident, which it's old news, it was a year ago.
Right.
And, it was dirty pool for somebody to now show the video. We went to them. He has very good management team in James Prince, in Andre Ward. And we said, you got to take this kid in hand. And the kid has a great role model in his grandfather, who's really raised him, and Coach K, who's the Olympic coach. So they all sat with him, and they assured me, and he assured me, and I believe that nothing like that will ever happen again. So, it was a bad incident. I don't approve of having fighters and these kids who run the streets. My guys that fight on Top Rank don't do that. This was a bad thing with Shakur, but I am absolutely certain that it will never happen again.
Bob, June 15th, I believe it's the date, Tyson Fury makes his top-ranked debut under the ESPN banner, taking on Tom Schwartz. The biggest upset in boxing in 2019, Bob, according to your own employees, that you were able to keep this secret till the announcement. How did this deal come about with you and Frank Warren?
Well, you saw last weekend a fight that we televised on ESPN Plus fight show from Dubai. Now, we were talking with these MTK Global that has so many Irish and European fighters, and they're headquartered in Dubai, and they wanted to make a deal with us so that their fighters could be seen on ESPN, ESPN Plus. And we had a representative go over to Dubai to talk with them. Billy Keane, who knew the head of MTK Global, this woman, and he went over to talk to her, and it became obvious that their top fighter, who was at that time promoted by Frank Warren, was Tyson Fury. And one thing led to another, and they suggested us entering into a contract with them and Frank to promote Tyson Fury. It really happened by accident. And so we went to ESPN. Of course, it's a big heavyweight, cost a lot of money. And ESPN, Jimmy Pitara said, go for it. Well, we went for it. We signed the deal. Everybody is happy. And our idea is, I think Tyson Fury is extraordinarily talented, but more than that, he is a real character.
Mm-hmm.
He is my next coming of George Foreman. Everybody, remember, loved during the comeback, loved Foreman, loved his personality. I mean, he would get, when he was fighting on HBO, 20 to 25% of HBO subscribers would tune in to watch his fight. That's going to happen with Tyson Fury. He is a force, and it's going to be a lot of fun promoting him. And our idea is to build Tyson Fury up so that when he gets in the ring, maybe next year with Wilder or Joshua, everybody in America knows him, falls in love with him, and can't get enough of him. And I hope that that PBC, if they're listening, does near as much as we're going to do for Tyson Fury with ESPN, they should do for Wilder. And then we'll have a pay-per-view fight between them where we'll do 2 to 3 million homes.
Well, I would argue that Tyson Fury even now is a bigger star than Deontay Wilder, even though British, even though, I mean, I think that's a safe argument to make. How soon would you like to have the rematch with Deontay Wilder and Fury?
I would think next year. I would think, I'm looking forward to big pay-per-view fights next year. Loma against Teofimo Lopez is one, and then to also have Wilder fighting Fury.
Okay, where does this leave Anthony Joshua then, in your view?
Anthony Joshua is stuck on an island. Now, here's his real problem. I mean, it's a real problem. It's a dilemma. Joshua is a tremendous attraction in England. He's a great kid. Could be a tremendous attraction in the United States. Eddie Hearn, his promoter, is tied up with the zone. That means that if Joshua fights here, the fight has to be on the zone and can't be on regular pay-per-view. Well, you can't make up for 2 to 3 million homes, the revenue, by having him fight on the zone. And with Wilder, he fights, say, on Fox. And so ESPN and Fox could make a deal as far as distributing the fight. That fight can happen on pay-per-view. If Joshua fights in the United States, he can't be on pay-per-view. So he's put himself on an island.
He's the odd man out.
Yeah, but what we have to he's the odd man out. What we have to do is do Wilder and Fury, pay-per-view, big and so forth, maybe a rematch of that. And then when Joshua's contract runs out with Eddie Hearn, sign Joshua to fight on ESPN. That's our strategy.
Okay, well,
No covert operation
yeah,
here.
that's an open book.
We don't go behind anybody's back.
Bob, let's go down memory lane. Speaking of heavyweights.
Well, here's the thing. Just
Go ahead,
before
Mario.
we started, thank you for that, and I love the planet. I'm already fired up for next year. Before we started, I was telling Bob about taking my family to WrestleMania at Giant Stadium, MetLife Stadium.
Is it still going on, Mario?
Oh my gosh,
Jeez,
it was like a whole
I
day
still
event.
call it Giant Stadium.
So do I.
Screw the Jets. They own half of it.
Hey, you grew up a Giants fan?
Oh, die
I've
hard.
had season tickets to the New York Giants when they played in Yankee Stadium. I've had 8 season tickets since 1957.
Yeah.
I've had my moments of glory and terrific. My kids grew up with the Giants, but since '57, we've had season tickets to the Giants. I mean, now my kids live on the West Coast, but we always manage to go back for a couple of games. They will rise from the ashes.
They will rise from the ashes.
He's been through Joe Pisarcik to Lawrence Taylor.
So it was such a great time. We talked about.
I remember Fran Tarkington.
Right, of
played.
course.
1 year.
But real quick, not to digress, when I had mentioned Vince McMahon and you talked about the great marketing, but you actually knew Vince and his father, right?
Well, Vince's father was a wrestling promoter, and we, in those days, used the wrestling promoters to be our closed-circuit exhibitors. We didn't have pay-per-view. So when you had a big fight, a big Ali fight, you put it on closed-circuit theaters and arenas and so forth. And Vince Sr. was our exhibitor in the areas that he was doing wrestling.
Right.
And at one point, Vince Sr., great guy, calls up. He says that my son is going to go into the promotion business. I'd like to send him to you to train him. So Vince Jr., now the head of WWE, brilliant guy, came to see me. And the first thing he said to me was, I met Evel Knievel, and it'd be a great idea to promote Evil going over the Snake River. I don't want to talk about it because it was it was a nightmare. But
Wait, it had nothing to do with wrestling, but okay.
and nothing to do with wrestling or anything. You're right. And then we worked on Ali Inoki,
Yes.
But again,
Which is the inspiration for mixed martial arts.
Bring Vince here. Vince and I can discuss all these crazy things that we did. But he has taken that, he and his wife Linda have taken the WWE to new plateaus. It's a tremendous multi-billion-dollar company. He's absolutely great. And that's an example of a pupil far exceeding the mentor.
Mario, call Vince now. Call Vince, okay?
I will. And Stephanie McMahon, his daughter, is actually now really the one running the show right there.
Yeah.
She's doing a fantastic. But it got me thinking, Bob, of huge events happening in stadiums. And you promoted Ali-Norton 2 at Yankee Stadium back in the day.
Ali 3.
Or pardon me.
3.
Was it Ali-Norton 3?
1976.
Yeah. Well, Ali-Norton 3, yes, at Yankee Stadium. What do you remember specifically about that event?
You bring back nightmares. Well, let me tell you the story.
Why was that a nightmare? You already had 2 under the belt.
Now, let me tell you.
Okay.
All right. I, together with Madison Square Garden, who was our partner, we did Ali-Norton in Yankee Stadium. Now, go back, George Foreman had signed to fight Joe Frazier. This wasn't the Jamaica fight. And Jerry Perenchio, who promoted Foreman, went to George Steinbrenner and said to George, we'd like to do Foreman Frazier in Yankee Stadium. And George And he talked to Mike Burke at Madison Square Garden, and Mike said, no, don't do that fight. We'll make an Ali-Norton fight and give you the Ali-Norton fight for Yankee Stadium. Short end to this, Foreman and Frazier fought at the Nassau Coliseum. It's like miles from New York City.
Right.
Nobody went, and Jerry Perenchio blew his brains out in that promotion, and he's never forgiven me. You know, Jerry became the head of Univision.
Yeah.
He's a great, great guy, passed away a couple of years ago. But we then put Ali-Norton in Yankee Stadium, and we prepared for a big, big major event, and it was becoming a major event.
Yeah, because they had split fights at that point, right? And
Yes.
Norton had broken Ali's jaw in the first fight, second fight.
First fight.
Norton won the first fight
Right.
by breaking Ali's jaw, won a decision.
Right.
Then the second fight was in the Forum, where I partnered with Jack Ken Cook, and Ali won a close decision.
Very close. I'll both.
This was the third fight. All right. And we had tickets went really well. We had sold about 30,000 tickets in advance, and we set up the booths outside the old Yankee Stadium. We had ticket sellers in every booth because we anticipated a tremendous walk-up to at least 10,000 more people.
Sure.
All right. Meanwhile, we got word 2 weeks before the fight that the police were going to go on strike. So, we panicked. And at that particular time, because of Ali, I was very close with the Nation of Islam. Not the Farrakhan Nation of Islam, but the Elijah Muhammad, his son, Nation of Islam. And they came to me. I was very friendly with them because of Ali. And they said, look, the police are going to go on strike. We'll have the brothers from the Nation of Islam cordon off the outside of Yankee Stadium to keep everybody calm and so forth. And
What could go wrong?
and I went to the police with Mike Burke, and we said, look, the police are going on strike. The Nation of Islam will help us, and they will and they would keep control. They would. They would keep control. Now I had experience but this goes back to Evel Knievel when I hired the motorcycle gang, the Hells Angels, to be and it worked. It worked. They
Hell's
kept,
Angels
Yeah,
and
you
Nation
get-
of Islam
yeah.
as security.
Yeah, okay. All right. So the
You
police.
should get MS-13
so the
for your
poli-
next one, Bob.
So the police said to me that if you bring in the Nation of Islam, we're going to bring criminal charges against you, blah, 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 blah. And the garden backed off. So the night of the fight, we had no Nation of Islam guards. The police went on strike. These friggin' police captains and so forth hung around. People were getting robbed as they went into the building. It was out of control.
Oh, my
the
God.
writers
No
were
kidding.
getting their typewriters then taken away. It was absolute chaos.
Oh, my God.
Remember, we had 108 ticket booths around Yankee Stadium, and the people would get off the subway. That's how you got to Yankee Stadium. They'd get off the subway, and they would see everybody, all this chaos. They would get back in the subway, and it was an elevated train. They would get back on the elevated train and go back to Manhattan. We sold 8 tickets, 108 booths. We sold 8 tickets
Oh,
the
my
night of the
God.
fight. It was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster.
And Bob, speaking of the robberies, I remember watching that
That's
fight. You had a
amazing.
series in the 80s called Super Bouts on ESPN, which would replay a lot of your old bouts. Look, I'm a big Ali guy. Obviously, you are too. I got to be honest with you. I thought Norton got robbed that fight.
That
What's
was
your
his
opinion?
kryptonite. Tonight,
Another story. Last year, or 2 years ago, I think, I was a guest to Jerry Jones at a Cowboy football game. And I brought my son, who's a dean of the School of Education, UC Irvine, and big boxing fan and so forth, obviously. And from across the room, Jerry has this huge box in the outside area. I hear, Bob, come over here. I want to talk to you. So I look, and it's George W. Bush, who's a big fan, really good, one of the nicest guys I've ever met. And he had watched on ESPN a 30-30 of the Ali-Norton third fight. And he said, Bob, tell me, you promoted that fight. Who really won the fight?
Oh, that's great.
Right. So I told him I thought that Ali had pulled it out by a little bit. It was a very close, and it wasn't a great fight. And so we were talking about it, and then I had introduced my son, and his wife, George's wife, was there, the president's wife, and he wasn't president then. And we talked about education and so forth. And this is about 10, 15 minutes of conversation. And I said to him, Mr. President, tell me, what do you think of Donald Trump? And he went on for 20 minutes. I'm not going to tell you what he said.
Oh, come on.
But it just reinforced my opinion of Trump.
Well, speaking of Donald Trump, I looked something up a couple years ago, and a little bit young guy, Foreman Holyfield, you were one of the co-promoters, I believe, along with Main Events, but I think that event was hosted by Donald Trump at his property. You had a bad experience with that one, didn't you?
Well, let me tell you the story. Dan Duva was the head of Main Events. He's passed away, great guy. And we signed to do the Holyfield-Foreman fight. Holyfield was the champion. Foreman was like bigger-than-life figure. And then the question is, where would we do the fight? At Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas or in Atlantic City? Because we knew there was interest in both places. So we said, whoever the highest bidder was, because I figured that Caesars would outbid anybody because, if you went to Las Vegas, you spent 4 or 5 days in Las Vegas, the gamblers. And if you went to Atlantic City, there weren't enough hotel rooms, an overnight kind of job. So that, Las Vegas was clearly the place that would come up with the money. So Caesar's Palace, Terry Lanny, who later became the head of MGM, has since passed away, bid $11 million. Trump bids for Atlantic City $11.5 million. So I tell Dan, I don't trust this guy. I trust Caesars. Let's take the $11 million and go to Las Vegas. Dan said no, because I was living in Las Vegas, and he had that idea that I had any influence over the Nevada Commission, which I certainly didn't, because I fought with them all the time. He decided we have to go. We made a deal, have to go to Atlantic City. They bid $500,000 more. So we make a deal. We sign a contract for $11.5 million. About the time we sign the contract, the first Gulf War breaks out.
Yeah.
And that was the one with George H.W. Bush was the president.
Dad.
And, it breaks out. It's been, the fight's going, the promotion is
Operation
going
Desert
on.
Storm, I remember. Yeah.
So about 4 to 5 weeks before the fight is to take place, we get a fax. There were no that I communicated from Donald Trump saying contract is over, act of war. So I think it's a joke, and I call a press conference, and I said it's only an act of war if Saddam Hussein lands his troops on the beaches of Atlantic City.
Right.
Got a big laugh and so forth. But Trump was serious because they weren't selling that many tickets. He was going to take a loss. So we said to him, I call up Terry Lanny. He said, look, we're not much time, but we'll do the fight for the $11 million. And I said to Trump, Donald, we're going to Las Vegas. You said there's no contract. He says, if you go to Las Vegas to do the fight, you're going to get sued. I said, what do you mean? You said there's no contract.
Right.
He says, I don't care. I'll sue you anyway. And I'll stop the fight from happening, or I'll put enough doubt in people's mind that it will hurt the pay-per-view.
What's his
Just
mindset behind that? Doesn't he know you're an attorney?
Yeah, but an attorney who has to put an event on and doesn't want the cable system doing their first pay-per-view big event to panic.
Right.
If he now has a suit, of course I win the suit. But he knows that if he brings an action, it'll take a week or 2 weeks, and I'm running out of time.
That's bad.
So then we sit down with him, and he renegotiates the deal. You can take the gate. I'll pay another $1 million. I'll pay other expenses. So at the end of the day, when it was all over, we accepted it because we didn't want to jeopardize the pay-per-view, which did over 10% buy rate, which is incredible. We took the deal, and it ended up we lost $2.5 million from what he had promised. In other words, we came out with $9 million, and we were supposed to get 11.5. Now, I'm not the only witness. Dan has passed away, unfortunately, but Kathy, who is still
His
involved
daughter,
in promotion, will tell you the same story. So I knew what kind of person this man is, and the fact that he's president of the United States makes me sick to my stomach.
He wanted him impeached in 91.
And we had, I remember Tyson fought there a few times, and Atlantic City was a strong presence for boxing for a long time. Bob, could it ever resurface, or is that just a dead, bygone era? Do you ever see Atlantic City becoming a player again?
No. And the reason not is because Atlantic City was a magnet for people who didn't want to come to Las Vegas, where the only other place where you could have casino gambling.
Right.
And tremendous population in northern New Jersey and Philadelphia and so forth, New York. Now with the casino gambling, you had Foxwoods, you had Mohegan Sun, now you have Philadelphia with gambling, and also the new generation, the younger generation, is not into gambling like the older generation. Why? Because the kids now play the video games quick. For them to sit at a table, a blackjack table, it's so slow.
Right.
They don't want to do it.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So you can see in Las Vegas how the gaming is way, way down.
Really?
If it wasn't for them to bring in Chinese from all over, it would be even down more, because the younger generation would rather take $10,000 and buy a table at a nightclub and have a good time than to sit at a table and gamble in a casino.
Is that a good thing for society?
I think it's a good thing that people aren't so, people, gambling is okay if it can be controlled. In most cases, or a lot of cases, it can't be. So I think the fact that gambling is not as limited to two places, so people would come and gamble. You have gambling all over, and people aren't really, it's not like the forbidden fruit now,
right,
where people could come. It's something that's part of life, and so they don't do as much as they did before.
That's interesting.
But the younger people are not into that kind of game. They may be into sports gaming.
Right.
That's different.
That's different. Games of chance,
Well,
but it
Atlantic
is ingrained in the Asian culture, though.
Well,
so
we're
that's
good
fine.
at Pai Gow. Now, sports gambling is now legalized in Atlantic City. Do you think that has any chance of succeeding there?
I think sports gambling has helped Atlantic City. But again, the problem is that it's not the easiest place in the world to get to. The area, they have never built up the area the way they should. So if you go out of a hotel and you walk one block into the Atlantic City, you can really, be attacked and so forth, robbed. I think it's better now than it was, but it has the reputation of being a very dangerous place
shady.
in the city.
Bob, last week, I believe, was the 32nd anniversary of a fight that took place in 1987, and I know me and you both have the same opinion that Marvin Hagler beat Ray Leonard. That being said, the decision was the decision. Why did that rematch never happen?
Well, okay. Ray wanted to do the rematch. Ray, Ray is a terrific guy. I mean, he's been a real credit to society. I mean, he's in charitable endeavors. So I can't say enough good about Ray Leonard. Terrific, terrific guy. And after that fight, Ray realized how much money was in that fight and was sort of a little angry at me, but not really because it wasn't my fault. When we did the first fight, I was sideways with his advisor, Mike Trainer. And Trainer said, we're not going to do that fight if Top Rank is going to promote the fight. And Marvin said, we're not going to do a fight unless Top Rank is the promoter. And Marvin meant it. Yeah,
loyal guy.
Yeah.
To the end,
loyal
incredibly.
guy. So Trainer sat with me. He says, I don't want you. I don't think you're a good promoter, and so forth. And I ended up paying Ray a flat fee of $11 million. And Marvin fought on a percentage. And Marvin made $19 million. So, of course, I rubbed it into Ray afterwards. Hey, your guy had you take 11. My guy fought in a percentage and made 19.
Wow.
And so
In 1987, by the way.
so now
LTB, listen
now
to Bob.
now it's Marvin goes off to Italy. He's angry, becomes an actor in spaghetti westerns.
So that's a fascinating conversation.
And we have an event. Caesars does an event in Caesar's Palace. We wore tuxedos and so forth. A salute to boxing. And Ray was there. Marvin was there. Tommy Hearns was there. Tony Danza was there. Muhammad Ali. I have a picture of all of us together. And Ray said, go over and talk to Marvin and tell him, let's do the rematch. We'll make a fortune. So I went over to Marvin and I said, look, I just talked to Ray. He said, let's make the rematch. We'll all make a fortune. And he looked at me with the way Hagler stares, and he says, go tell Ray to find a life for himself.
Ooh. Wow.
And I knew Marvin had finished with boxing. Now, I knew the fact before the Leonard fight that Marvin wanted to get out. Marvin wanted to retire for boxing after the Hearns fight. He didn't want anything to do with it. But somehow I got him to sign a contract for the Mugabe fight, which he postponed once for an injury. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. And we finally had the Mugabe fight, a great fight. Now he definitely wants to retire. So I talked to Pat Petronelli, he passed away, who was his manager. And we say, we got to get him to do the fight. There's so much money. So Pat and I and Pat's lady, Betty Whitney, go drive from Boston to New Hampshire where Hagler has a summer place. And I remember going through the fog, and we get there, and we park outside. He had a pretty big place, big lot of area, and remember a table. And Pat said, let me go and talk to him. And they go out, and they sit at the table. And there's Marvin pounding the table, pounding the table, pounding the table. Pat gets back in the car. I said, what happened? He says, well, I told him that my brother, Goody, who was the trainer, and myself get a total of 33% of the purse. I said, Marvin, if you take the fight, we'll take a lot less. And he started pounding the table. I don't know if I'm going to fight this guy. I don't want to fight anymore. But if I fight, you're taking the 33%.
Yeah.
That was the
Wow.
kind of guy he was, Marvin.
Just a stand-up
principle.
principle
And he
guy.
finally agreed to do the fight, but it was reluctant. But it was a lot of money. And he's retired now, and he doesn't spend a nickel just the way he was before.
Awesome. I love him.
He never put a nickel in a slot machine. All the fights he did in
Look at
Las
that.
Vegas. He never bought me a meal. He was the most frugal guy I've ever met.
The more I learn about him, the more I like him.
yeah.
More, you know, we
So
can,
I would call him up and say, Marvin, I'm doing this big fight in Las Vegas. I want you and your wife to come as my guest. And he said, okay, we'll come, but I need $10,000.
he wanted a personal appearance fee?
Yeah, right.
Wow. That's That's fantastic. Bob, as you know, we could talk to you for hours, but just one last question before we put a pause until you come back yet again. We're going to have to kidnap you. Yeah. We're talking about rematches that didn't happen. I believe I asked you the last time, but do you think if all things being equal, those were five, and then Marvin, obviously that was his last fight, but two fighters that were in their prime, very controversial fight, which I thought De La Hoya won, in a rematch I thought would have done big business. De La Hoya Trinidad never did happen. Was it purely Don King, the reason, or did both fighters not want it to happen?
Who knows? It was like
because that seemed like so much business left on the table there.
It was Trinidad was having trouble making welterweight. King and I hated each other, and we started yelling and screaming every time we had a meeting together. Seth Abrahams tried to bring sanity into it. And Oscar's father was so disgusted with that decision because Oscar clearly won that fight. You know, first 9 rounds was like 8-1. You know, Trinidad didn't win a round.
I agree.
And then he won the last 3 because Oscar just boxed and stayed away. So there was a lot of bitterness, and it didn't happen. And there wasn't one person that could be blamed. Everybody could. King,
but that was a financially successful fight for
King,
you, right?
It was huge.
Right, exactly. That's why
huge.
I thought. And the way it ended, I thought it'd be huge business.
It was Oscar's father. It was me. I didn't help. It was King.
His father just didn't want the fight
No,
again?
we get in a room and we start yelling at each other. And I accused him of fixing the officials. That's a big story. I don't want to get into it. I don't want to get sued. But Oscar won that fight.
I agree. I was there.
Clearly won that fight.
Yeah, by context, I still remember the surprise announcement when Trinidad fought David Reed in March, and a fax came in to all the media members. We were stunned, and I remember. So at that point, they were in different weight classes, and they went different ways. One last question: I've never asked you this, Bob. All the years that I've known you and we've done interviews, how did you choose Top Rank as the name for your company instead of like Arum Promotions?
Well, because I had a partner. First company we had was a company called Mainbound. And that company, we had as stockholders Jim Brown and Herbert Muhammad, who was not the manager of Ali-Norton, just an advisor, the son of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And after Ali couldn't fight for 3.5 years, Herbert became the manager of Ali, so he couldn't be part of it. And I formed a new company called Top Rank, where my partner was Fred Hoffheinz, who was the son of Roy Hoffheinz, who built the Astrodome, wonder of the world, in Houston. And we became very close, and so we were partners. He owned 50%, and I owned 50%, and his wife named the company Top Rank. Couldn't be Arum Promotions or Hoffheinz Promotions. It was Top Rank.
Great name.
So she named the company Top Rank. And then a couple of years later, Fred, who always was interested in politics, was elected mayor of Houston, Texas. And he felt it was not right for him to have a 50% interest in a boxing promotion company, and he sold his 50% to me, and I became the sole owner of Top Rank. But at that time, December of 1970, when Top Rank did its first fight, which was Ali and Oscar Bonavena, on December 7th, 1970, in Madison Square Garden. That was our first fight.
Wow.
And I'll tell you another story about that fight. So now Ali gets his license back, and we're doing the fight with Bonavena. And remember, December 7th, in Madison Square Garden, and there was a guy who owned Benihana named Rocky Aoki.
Yes,
and
his son is an incredibly successful DJ, Steve Aoki.
Yes, he is.
Yes.
And so
Fun
Aoki
fact.
gives Ali some money to wear a robe that has all Japanese writings on it. So I see it and I panic. It's December 7th. What is that? Pearl Harbor Day. I said, Ali, after all this stuff,
gosh.
you can't go in the ring.
That's great. That's an awesome story.
Wow.
But Ali did it anyway. And
Of course he did.
Well, and the rest has been history.
The rest is Bob. My gosh, again, just sit here and talk to you for hours. I so appreciate you coming in.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's fun.
It's so much fun.
Can't wait for Chapter 3.
Yes, Chapter 3. Now it's got to become a habit. So.
The trilogy.
The
Yes,
trilogy.
the trilogy. We look for exactly, and it will deliver. Thank you again.
My pleasure. It's my pleasure. It's a lot of fun, guys. We got some great fights coming. Let me tell you, everybody should give great credit to ESPN for getting behind the sport of
Yes.
boxing. And with ESPN, boxing will again be elevated to the major sport that it once was.
And should be.
All right, so this Friday night on ESPN Plus, it'll be Vasyl Lomachenko, brought to you by Top Rank and Mr. Bob Arum. All right, so that's it for this week's edition of the 3 Knockdown Rule. On behalf of Mario Lopez, this is Steve Kim saying goodbye, everybody.
Hey.
All right.